Hi there, this is a 5-part series about making a journal from scratch, so if you haven't seen part 1, then go back and watch that video first. To start out, I thought it would be good just to go through the list of totally bare bones basic materials that you will need to create your journal. So, first you will need some type of cover material. It means what is going to be the cover of your journal, and we will definitely go through the details of this. Then you need some type of paper or pages of your journal. So all of those sheets of paper or mix of papers. Then you will also need some type of linen or waxed string that you will use to sew up your journal. There are those made for bookbinding, but you can also buy things from the hardware store. Really, the important part is to have really strong string that won't break because you're going to be sewing with it and using it to hold your journal together. Then you will obviously need a needle to use to sew the string with and put your journal together, and an awl or something to punch holes with, which will make the whole construction of your journal easier. And those are really just like the bare bone minimum materials that you will need to make a journal. So pretty simple. Obviously, I haven't mentioned like scissors if you're going to be cutting your paper, or glue or art supplies that you might want to use if you're going to like decorate your cover or do other things to your journal. But these are just the bare bone materials. Okay, so in part 2, let's jump into making your very own journal. The first thing you need to decide is what size your journal will be. I usually go with whatever my paper size is, meaning if I'm creating a simple journal from like a cheap ream of copy paper, I'm just going to make my journal the size of those papers folded in half so I don't have to trim as much. It's just less waste of paper. So if you're in the US, you might be using letter size paper, so folding it in half will give you an 8.5 by a 5.5 inch journal size. In Europe, we have A4 sized paper. That's what you see me folding here, and that will give me an A5 sized journal, the size when the journal is closed, basically, the folded papers. Or you can obviously use any kind of paper or material that you have. You can use a giant piece of watercolor paper like this. It's A3 in size, so if you fold it in half, you will get a very large A4 sized journal. You can choose any size journal and you don't even have to really measure exactly. The idea is just to decide on the final size and how much paper you want to include inside, meaning how many signatures you are going to sew in. That way you can calculate the final size of your cover. And since we're talking about covers, I'm showing you Daphne's Diary here. It is a magazine. And it is because the cover of the magazine has a really nice glossy, like thick paper. So you can definitely like use found papers and rip that out and use that as your cover of your journal. Most times I use scrap pieces of leather. So here's a bunch of leather, and it's a big mix because I get samples and mistakes and things like that from leather companies. So when you're considering something for your journal cover, you obviously want something sturdy and strong and aesthetically whatever it is you want, and it should protect your pages. But oftentimes like leather can be really thick, but it can also be sort of floppy. Or maybe you want to use something like fabric, or maybe a type of paper, but it's just not that thick. So one way you can deal with materials like that is to basically reinforce it. So oftentimes when I use leather, it's not a very thick type of leather. So what I do is actually cut out cardstock or thick paper to the right size, and I sew it onto the leather. So that will make it basically super strong. So you can do that with fabric, you can do that with multiple sheets of paper, or collage something together. There's a lot of possibilities. Basically, in the end, you're making the material stronger so that you have a sturdy journal cover. And you can see I've done that for a lot of pieces of leather here, and I've measured it in such a way where I have A5 journals, but they actually fit 3 signatures. See how they have that spine in the middle area? It's up to you how large you want your journal to be. You just need to make sure you have your journal cover material large enough to protect the pages you put inside. So another thing I wanted to show you are these like old calendars, which are a great option because they're usually of thicker paper and they're decorative. So you definitely can use old calendars. Like, what do you do with that afterwards, right? You can use that as your journal covers as well. You can obviously decorate as well, or collage over them, or mix them up. I know some people who like to sort of sew lots of different types of paper together and sort of make like a quilt that will become their cover. Obviously, there are a lot of options. You can also use like a manila folder, which is obviously a bit thicker, or scrapbook paper. You can find different thicknesses. Another thing I really like to use are envelopes, because when you fold them in half, and if you position it this way, the back automatically has a back pocket. So that's pretty cool for a journal, right? You have like a little pocket where you can stick things in. So that's one idea to consider. And you can obviously also use these sort of thick cardboard, hardboard kind of papers. This one is on the back of an old watercolor paper pad, so you can cut that out and decorate it as you please and use that as your journal cover. There's just really a lot of options. Obviously, if it's too thick, it's going to be really difficult to fold. So you sort of want that combination, like thick enough but not too thick. Another thing that you can use are greeting cards, and obviously these can be very nice quality, but you will be making a smaller sort of like notebook type of journal, right? One signature, because they're not that big. But I can imagine making a set of these for someone as a gift, sort of like a bunch of pocket notebooks. That would be really, really a cute idea and a really nice gift for a crafty friend. Okay. So consider what you want to make your journal cover out of and sort of have that material ready with you. So to review, I wanted to give you a little guide for figuring out what the size of your journal cover will be. In my example, on the left, you'll see that it is an A5 size journal, but there is no extra width added for the spine area in the middle. So the yellow shows that I'm probably going to add a bit of breathing room all around. That just makes it so that your journal cover is larger than your actual papers and sort of protects all the edges all around. But that is most likely for very few sheets of paper, basically just one signature of paper inside. If you want to add more signatures, then take a look on the right side where it's still an A5 journal, but you'll see in the middle I've added usually about 1.5 centimeters extra width because that will be my spine. And the reason for that is because if I include 3 signatures of paper, when they're stacked up, they take up some space. So I need to make sure that my cover gives me that width. Now, what I usually do in that case is that I actually fold or score my journal cover in those lines already so that my spine is defined and it's not sort of smooth, if that makes sense, because I like having that shape like it's a rectangle like book. But if you like just having it smooth all the time, that's okay as well. I think usually traveler's notebooks are more like in that style where there's no defined line where the spine starts, but it's just all rounded. So it depends on you. But notice the yellow part that I've illustrated there. There's breathing room all around so that the cover will protect all the papers inside, but there's actually more width as well. And you might want to consider that if you have a lot of paper because, the paper starts sticking out a bit more if you don't trim it. And also some people like to have even more width to maybe include like a pen with their journal, or they like to put tabs or extra little bits that stick out on the side of their pages, so you just need more protection. So it's just having that extra width. If this is your first time making a journal, it probably might make sense to fold out all your paper, create your signatures, stack them up, and then take a look to see how much space you actually need, so that you can see it right there in front of you. I'm not really huge on like exact measurements and things. I just sort of have things in front of me and like want to see it visually. Then it will make more sense, and I'll be able to cut the journal cover of the right size. And after a while, if you always make journals of the same size, then you'll sort of have it down and it won't be as confusing anymore. Okay, so I will see you in the next video.